But we're just going to keep flying through here. We might have a new link on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, with these expensive guys, like I think the way to target against expensive studs like this when they're this owned is just to kind of play the ownership game, and you hope that Scherzer has an off game. Maybe he only goes 4 or 5 innings and he gives up a few runs, and then they can keep it up against the bullpen. So I'm not really into targeting one-offs against Scherzer that much. I do like the idea of a leverage stack, though. Are you a 150 maxer, Terry?
Typically, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm the same way. Like in a single entry, I don't think you need to go that crazy and raise stack. Maybe you could take a bat or two against him, but it's just like picking a guy who's going to hit a home run off Scherzer is just never a really fun thing to do.
You're throwing darts at that point. Yeah. I can take a quick peek at my home run model, just looking at it. It looks like based on the projected lineup, I've got Brandon Lowe as the top guy at a 7 in my model. Usually like 10 is the mark for, being a good chance to hit a home run. So he's at 7. Austin Meadows is like right there at 6.83. But I mean, those are not strong. Like you're really likely to hit a home run kind of numbers on this in this model. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe if you wanted to leverage stack against Scherzer, by all means, if someone's 50% in MLB, things can happen in baseball. So there's always some merit to that. What about bats on the other side against Charlie Morton? We haven't really hit on Morton, and I don't know that there's a lot to hit on just because he's not really stretched out. He only threw 36 pitches in his last start. So I'm assuming we're just crossing off Morton, and then it looks like Robles might lead off for 2,100 on DraftKings. I mean, for a cash game, that looks about as good as you can ask for. $2,100 outfield and a guy who actually isn't. He's not a bad hitter or anything like that. In fact, he's a pretty good hitter. Yeah. So even against Morton, probably going to get his first couple of bats against him. 2,100 is a crazy, crazy good price. What are you doing with the rest of this game here?
Yeah, I like getting to some of those Nats bats for sure. I wrote them up in my column overnight last night as one of my 2 stacks, and I love you picked them off right off the top. 2,100 for Victor Robles leading off is a completely broken price. That's something that FanDuel would normally do. So I would be on that very often. He's 19.3% ownership. That'll probably go up throughout the day just because of that price, and everybody in the industry is probably going to be talking about it. So keep an eye on that. I wouldn't throw him out there very much as a one-off just because he's going to be so owned like that, but I think he's almost a mandatory part of that stack if, in most of them that you build. You mentioned Morton. Yeah, he's probably going to go like 3 or 4 innings today at most. Still dealing with the diminished velocity. Still just seems to be struggling. I was looking at his stuff a little bit last night when I was writing up the Nats, and I was expecting to see diminished spin on his fastball because of the just some of the ways that people are getting to it. But it actually looks like he's throwing more spin on it despite the diminished velo. So I think maybe he's trying to overcompensate for the velo, and he's losing the fastball out of the zone. He's got higher whip and putting a few more guys on base. So I just think he doesn't have his stuff right now. He's a guy who found it late in his career, late in life, and it might just be gone. So I don't know what we're getting out of Charlie Morton going forward. I definitely don't think he's going to find it before game time today. Nats strike out just 20.6% of the time against righties. That's 3rd best in baseball this year. 157 ISO. So not showing a ton of power against righties, but I'm not really worried about it here. I think we're going to get into that bullpen. The bullpen's a little bit overworked. They're right around the middle of the league in most of the important stats. So not like a really threatening, tremendous bullpen they're coming after him either. So I think it's a good spot for Nats.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking at the top stack tool. I think my favorite tool on the site for pretty much every sport, consolidates ownership and projection really well. It gives you a great look at the slate, whether you're hand building or looking to, especially I think building with an optimizer, you can see which stacks are going to shoot to the top that maybe shouldn't. And I figured the Nats would just be super over-owned. But Robles only coming in at about 20% ownership right now on a 6-team slate. Like, I think that's probably going to go up just because of the max ownership. Like, those two go really well together in lineups. Scherzer, the expensive pitcher on the slate, and then Robles, like one of the cheapest players and in a really good spot, and just obviously mispriced. So I agree. I wouldn't try to get to Robles too often as a one-off, but in a Nat stack, I don't know how you avoid that. It's just too good a value.
Yeah, and a guy who hits for power and has speed, right? He 617 plate appearances last year, hit 17 home runs, stole 28 bags. I mean, the kid is just really, really good. Struggling with the power in the power department a little bit, only 2 homers, 0.088 ISO so far this year. But we've seen quality from him, so I'm not worried about that. And I think he's going to just do a dynamite job getting off of this team ahead of Trey Turner, Juan Soto. I like Asdrubal and Howie Kendrick in the middle of that lineup. So I think there's a lot to do with that Nat stack.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys want to keep an eye on ownership, our free piece of premium content for today for MLB is actually the ownership projections. So pretty good day to have those. Keep an eye on Scherzer. Keep an eye on where Robles is at, because we've seen guys on 6-game slates like this and even higher where some of these bad players that are just kind of in okay spots end up getting a ton of ownership. They're like the optimizer play. But I think Robles doesn't really fall into that category. He is just a good play. He's just mispriced by like 2. Like he should be double his price at the very least over on DraftKings. So just be aware of what you're doing when you're getting to your Scherzer Robles lineups. You don't want to put yourself into the same line of construction as 50% of the field, but great play regardless. We ready to move it on to the next one?
Yeah, I think we hit most of the marks in there. Kurt Suzuki, maybe sneaky catcher play in the Nats stack, only like 8% ownership projection right now, just to throw that one out there. Everybody likes catchers for DK.
All right, let's move it on to KC and Cleveland. We have Brad Keller and Zach Plesac on the mound. I think we're going to be interested in at least one of these guys. 3.3 implied total for the Royals and 4.8 for Cleveland. Plesac, with the low total going up against him, he's striking out over 30% of hitters so far this season. $7,600. He's going to be somewhat popular. And again, you can check those out in our ownership projections. We're making those free today, but not as popular as what I thought. So just coming in over 21% right now for Plesac. What are you doing with that against the Royals here?
Yeah, on DK, I like that a lot better at 7,600. He's 10-3 over on FanDuel, which is pretty expensive. So yeah, that's a tricky price for him over on the blue site. But yeah, I think definitely, especially I expected him to be higher owned on DraftKings as well. So I think that's a little bit of an inefficiency by the market and something we can take advantage of over there. Plesac, like you said, he's pitching pretty well. He had that missed time with the weird COVID thing where they went out to dinner and they sent him to the alternate site for a couple of weeks, but seems like he's stretched out fine. I'm getting a good projection on him. Like you said, 30% strikeouts, only 2% walks so far this year, 0.67 whip. So just not putting many guys on base, not allowing a lot of opportunities to get to him. Really like what he's doing. So that's a pitcher I think we can get to. And then on the other side of this one, he's ranked further down the board, honestly, than I thought he would be. But I actually kind of like Keller today. He's not that expensive on either site. He's not drawing any ownership. I was expecting him to be a little bit higher ranked. The Indians struggling a little bit against righty pitching, and Keller's just very good at keeping the ball in the yard, limiting runs, limiting opportunities, getting ground balls, getting out of jams. So I think we can work with both pitchers. Like you said, it's a game where I'm probably going to be on both arms and maybe not quite as much on any of the bats.
Yeah. So Keller, he's kind of one of those guys that, and it's kind of a throwaway line in the DFS community. Like, oh, he doesn't get blown up that often, but he really doesn't. 4 out of his 5 starts, he's had 1 bad start. In the other 4, he's allowed 1 or 0 earned runs. So $6,700 pitcher. I mean, he's $43 on Yahoo. That's much tougher to get to.
Yeah.
So I actually don't mind Keller as well as kind of a cheaper option that's going to get you some differentiation with the rest of your lineup, especially if you're going to some of the more popular bats. I think Keller is at least in play as an SP2. And you look at the Indians' numbers versus righties, they're actually not as stellar as I would have guessed. 90 WRC plus, basically an average K rate. They do walk a lot, but Keller is a guy with some pretty good control. I think quickly going back to just talking about Yahoo really quick. Max Scherzer is at $52 over on Yahoo. Plesac is the exact same price. And obviously there's a bit of a gap in their projection if you look at the projections on the site. But I don't think it's big enough to have Plesac at only 8%. So I actually don't mind him as a tournament pivot off of Scherzer over on Yahoo specifically. On DraftKings, you can play them both in the same lineup with Plesac being so cheap. So like both pitchers in this game, are you into targeting any bats on either side here, Royals or the Indians?
So I'm sure I'll have some Indians. They're a team I get to a lot. And, Keller is a guy that we're not expecting him to put up 10 strikeouts or something like that. He's a guy who, he pitches to a fair amount of contact, relies on getting a lot of ground balls. So the Indians are still somewhat in play, even though he's a guy who does suppress offense. They're a team that builds in just really well with that top around the horn in the infield, plus Fernando Reyes up at the top of the lineup in their top 5. They're not expensive on FanDuel. They're getting up there a little bit on DK with Ramirez and Lindor, both over 5,000, but the rest of the guys in that stack are not that expensive. The back end of the lineup suffers a little bit with like a Naquin and Naylor or Roberto Perez, Delano DeShields. They're hit and miss, all or nothing kind of options, but you can mix and match with them. So I'm not going to have nearly as much Indians as I normally would against a guy with not a ton of name brand on the pitcher side. But I will have a little bit. Just to throw in one more thing about the Indians against righties, 19th in the league with just 33 home runs this year. So not getting a ton of power, 147 ISO is 25th in the league. So not putting up a big threat to righty pitchers. So it's, Keller's still interesting to me. Royals on the other side against Plesac, probably not, maybe one or two just to have them and to mix them in, but not getting tremendous power marks. It's not a lineup I really love. You can get to Soler as a one-off. Whit Merrifield is fine, gives you multi-position. Hunter Dozier gives you some multi-position over there. But, not a lineup that's really doing a ton for me. Are you seeing much with the Royals side?
No. I mean, I just think Plesac is actually pretty good. And then a bunch of righties at the top of this lineup. Low implied total. I mean, there's just not much that I'm looking at. So, playing 150 lineups, there's always certain guys that you get to, regardless of which set of projections you're using. If you're using ours, I mean, you always get to Merrifield a little bit, just a good player for DFS, and maybe Soler because he's cheap. But I don't see myself getting to KC. Like, they're not going to be a staple of my lineups on any site tonight. So definitely like
Plesac. Getting some ownership here.
KC is?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, we're 21% on Soler. We've got top 3 guys are all over 10 on DK, so getting a little bit of attention, and that's surprising. I wouldn't expect that.
So whenever that's the case, it's like a cheap team with a low implied total. I always look at the value metric in our top stacks tool. So on DraftKings, they have the 3rd highest top value percentage, but there's a bunch of teams clumped up at the top. Like, it's not like they're an outrageous value. It's not like there's a bunch of Victor Robles's in this KC lineup where they're just good hitters and they're cheap and it's against a tough pitcher, but you got to play them anyways. I'm not really seeing that. So I'm okay fading KC, especially if they're going to get some ownership. I just assumed that they were getting nothing at all, but looks like 12.4% top value percentage, which is solid. But as a result, they're going to get a little bit more ownership than they probably should here.
Yeah, as out of the value plays, they're the one trending for the least team ownership, but it's still over what their mark of being one of the top 2 stacks is. So not a play I love.
Yeah, and I just don't think it's like, looking at the lineups I'm getting to on DraftKings, like, I don't think they're that necessary. I'd rather just play some more Robles or some of these cheaper Nats. They've got a full run, higher implied total. I don't know. I don't really see the necessity for a cheap Royals stack. It's not like this is a slate where you can play Garrett Cole and Max Scherzer in the same lineup and they're the cheap stack. They're not that appealing to me. So I'm okay fading them with a 3.3 implied total if they're going to keep up this ownership.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then, so a lot of their best bats land in the outfield too. So you've got that issue with, they take some opportunity away from some of the other teams, some of the other players you want to build into stacks with other teams. So yeah, not wild about what they do for you here.
All right, let's go to the Yankees and the Blue Jays. We've got a 4.3 implied total for the Yankees, 4.8 for the Toronto Blue Jays. Jordan Montgomery, Hyunjin Ryu for the Rays. Blue Jays. Blue Jays minus 125 favorite. This isn't a game that I'm getting to a lot with the pitching, but I want to hear your take. Do you have any interest in either side of this game?
Yeah, I think I can definitely get to some Ryu. His price isn't coming up for me for some reason over here.
8,500 on DK.
Yeah, so 85 on DK against this Yankees lineup, I can definitely justify that. I'm not sure why his FanDuel price isn't coming up for me. That's weird.
I got 95 on.
95. All right. So I think he's in play on both sides, really. The Yankees have been struggling. They got Gleyber Torres back, DJ LeMahieu's in the lineup, but they're missing Aaron Judge. They're missing Giancarlo Stanton. Gary Sanchez probably pretty likely to sit again. He's just been absolutely struggling. He's not hitting like half his weight this season, well under the Mendoza line. So they've been putting him on the bench. Miguel Andujar back in the lineup, but Gio Urshela out. So the Yanks are really a shell of their normal lineup since August 18th. They're like 5-18, bottom of the league in like everything. They put up a stat during the Yankees game yesterday that I didn't capture, but it was like 28th ranked in most important offensive categories. So really, really struggling. And Ryu is just pitching really well. So I think we can definitely get to him. Ks are up, strikeouts are up to 27.6% this year. He's getting a lot off of his changeup. He's brought that up 28% usage over the last 2 years. It's been a really good pitch for him. Limiting hard contact, 92nd percentile on hard hit rate, 71st in exit velocity, sitting 70th percentile in strikeout rate. So just doing a really, really good job. And I like his chances to continue that against this lineup. I do not see much for the Yanks today.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I don't know, maybe I dismissed Ryu a little bit there. I'm getting to some of him on DraftKings. It looks like he's not getting a ton of ownership. And he has a pretty good chance of being a top 2 pitcher, which you can see on Awesemo's top pitcher tool. So he's coming in under owned himself. So you got to like that. I try to bump those guys up that are coming in undervalued, try to bump the guys down a little bit because I make more lineups than what I actually am going to enter in, whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, or Yahoo. So I think that's like something I feel like everyone at the site does now. Alex has talked about it so much, and it just makes sense. Like if you're just playing projections only, unless you're playing a cash game, if you're playing tournaments, you got to account for ownership in some way, whether it's, keeping track of it in your head or keeping track of it while you're hand building, or just taking kind of the player names out of it and going ownership projection with everyone. So the top pitcher and top stack tool are really awesome for that.
Yeah, I sit in those all day long. And you mentioned it before. It's seriously for like every sport that we cover. Things that I don't even know anything about the sport, like NASCAR, I'll just pull that up and I'll be like, let me toss some NASCAR lineups in. You use the top drivers tool, and it's the same idea. Just look for the top success and, compare to the ownership. And you can put these things together just with some of the tools that we're giving you. So there's no need to go digging through FanGraphs for people's ISO from 2 years ago, guys. We're covering all that for you. So
That's right. We it helps cut down on time if you like playing and you got a full-time job elsewhere. Alex is doing the work for you. I won't even say we. I mean, Alex is doing the work for you. And actually, Terry, you are doing a lot of the work as well with your overnight article, the quick hits. I see that.
I like the editorial we, the royal we.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick to just kind of close the loop on this game. So I actually don't mind Ryu on DraftKings specifically. On FanDuel, it's a little bit expensive. I like going with some of the mid-tier options that we're going to talk about in a bit. Or getting all the way up to a guy like Scherzer or maybe even Plesac. So he's kind of in that dead zone for me. Ryu is on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, we'll get to a decent amount of him because he's undervalued in the top pitcher tool. Looking at these Yankees bats, they look to be somewhat cheap around the industry. Do you have any interest going against Ryu, or is he one of those guys that you don't really love targeting against?
I don't love targeting against him. I'm something of a homer, though, so I'm sure I'll have a few Yankee stacks in there just for the hell of it. But yeah, really don't love the spot for my guys today. I'm getting okay home run marks on the guys who normally pop on the home run board, the Glaber, Torres, the Gary Sanchez of the world. But the pricing's great on FanDuel in particular. 2,700 for Glaber Torres is absurd. I don't care that he's not hitting very well so far this year. He's just a dynamite player. 4,700 on DK, very affordable. I like Clint Frazier hitting cleanup at 4,100 there. Hicks has been struggling, but only 3,700. So yeah, you can do a lot price wise with these Yankees. We're getting a big ownership projection on Gary Sanchez. If he is in the lineup, that's a player I might be able to get to somebody else. Much as I love Gary, he's absolutely stings the ball when he manages to make contact. But again, only hitting 130 so far this year, 227 on base, 350 slug. Can't get over to his ISO here. 0.7, no, I'm sorry, but a 220 ISO, but only 58 WRC plus, so 42% below average in WRC plus. So just not making enough contact to justify almost a 30% ownership tag at 4,400 on DK. It's not cheap enough. You're not getting enough of a discount on a struggling player. Don't love the spot for Gary there.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Any player that's getting a bunch of ownership, I'm always looking for reasons to get off of them in MLB, even if it's Mike Trout, even if it's Victor Robles, 2,100 leading off. You always got to look for ways to get different in these event-based sports where it's home run or nothing for some of these guys. Blue Jays stack getting quite a bit of ownership over on DK and FanDuel as well. One of the, pretty decent top value percentage. So some of that's price, but the 4.8 implied total, who knows, that might get up to 5. Bunch of righties going up against lefty Jordan Montgomery. I'm seeing some Chad Green talk. Are you seeing that at all? I saw that on Fangraphs, that he was maybe going to be the probable starter. But do you know anything about that? Or are you expecting Montgomery to just start this game? And then what do you think of the J stack?
Yeah, I'm expecting Monty. I haven't seen anything saying it's Green. He did come down with my Fangraphs update too, though. So yeah, they've just got him in there. They might be thinking that if Monty only goes 4 innings, Green will be in there for 2 or 3 or something like that, which we could see. And I do like Green out of the bullpen, but not something I would necessarily play because we don't know if he's going to be out there on the mound at all. So I wouldn't do that. Montgomery, he's an okay pitcher in real life, not a 4th, 5th starter type guy, not an ace by any means. 27.5% soft contact so far this year, which is good. That's a key for him, getting soft contact, keep the ball on the ground. Gets okay whiff on his curveball, but just not a lot of strikeout upside. Not a pitcher I really like to go to at all. I don't really care what his price is. 6,400 on DK if you want to make him like a little 5% option as an SP2, 10% option as an SP2, and only roll half those lineups, then sure. But much, much more interested in the Blue Jays stack. Surprised that when I looked it up, they're just 15th in the league with a 176 ISO against lefties this year. But they're WRC plus 7% above average. They strike out just 22% of the time against lefties. So do pretty well in those numbers. And just a lot of bats that I tend to like and tend to get to. I like the pricing on some of these guys. We've got Vlad in the middle of this lineup, Vlad Jr. that is. Lord Gurriel Jr. Is another second-generation kid. Kevin Biggio. Love Randall Grichuk's power against any lefty, really. So really like him to get a good chance at hitting a home run from the top of the lineup here. So just a lot of different things we can do with this lineup. I like the way they fill out positions, and I like the price.
Yeah, they're definitely appealing. I guess the one thing would just be if a really high strikeout guy in Chad Green is expected to come into this game, and we don't know if he is, but if he is, like, I just hate stacking against these long reliever opener situations. And I don't know that we're going to have one here, but I always am looking to get off those regardless of what the Vegas total says. And it's more of a feel thing. It's probably something I shouldn't factor in, but like just having to face a new pitcher each inning, regardless of how bad the arms are, just seeing a new guy every time you're up, I feel like just would not be optimal. I don't know. What are your thoughts on kind of these long reliever opener situations? Are you fine targeting against them and just letting Vegas do the work, or what do you think about that?
So it's always a matter for me of who's coming in out of the pen and what the bullpen looks like. And for the Yankees, you mentioned it, they're a pretty high end bullpen. They get a lot of strikeouts out of the bullpen, a lot of good arms in there. So, yeah, it's a spot where you're almost saying, all right, we're going to give you a mediocre starter to start, but then for 2 innings, you're going to face a guy who's striking out people like Max Scherzer does, and then you're going to go to the bullpen. So you're taking 2 innings like out of that offense's game almost entirely. So you're basically, you can look at it almost as like one of the 7-inning games in the doubleheader that we're seeing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes those explode, but if you put a little bit of a black hole for offense in the middle of a game for a team, it could definitely do some damage. It's tough to predict, it's tough to call, but it's something that when we know it's an opener situation, I definitely am thinking about that for sure. Trickier with Montgomery today because we just don't know what the leash is going to be and we don't know what's coming out of the pen. But good point.
Yeah, just quick on Montgomery, I'm probably not going to end up there. I think there's a better option for cheaper that we'll talk about actually in this next game. So let's go there. Arizona and San Francisco. We've got low implied totals here, as we usually do in San Fran. 3.9 implied total for Arizona, 4.2 for the Giants. Again, Gallen and Kevin Gausman on the mound. Gallen, 9,200, having a really good season. Gausman, a little bit of a resurgence, 6,100. I'd play almost anyone for 6,100 in this park for the last few years. Going up against Arizona, you seen anything here outside of ownership, just matchup-wise? Are you seeing anything with Gausman that would scare you?
No, to be honest, I think it's a good spot for Gausman. D-backs 26th in the league with a 147 ISO and an 87, so 13% below average WRC plus against righties. They only strike out 20.3% of the time. That's second best in the league behind the Dodgers against right-handed pitchers. So that would be like the one if I really had to find something to throw against him. But like you said, Gallen's just pitching excellent. Gausman's just pitching really well this year. 31% strikeout rate this year, 3.09 xFIP. He's allowed 8 home runs in 40.2 innings, but I'm not really sweating that. He's got like a 2-pitch mix with his 4-seamer and his splitter, but he's getting tons of whiff on the splitter, doing a really, really good job. 84th percentile strikeout rate, 80th percentile in whiff. 81st in fastball velo, allowing a little bit of hard contact, 38th percentile in that exit velo allowed, 34th in hard hit rate, but he's managing that and doing a good job. So in this park, even though it's playing wacky this year for offense, I definitely think we can roll out some Gausman, and I think the field is probably under, at least on the FanDuel side, 16% is probably about where he should be at 77 on the FanDuel side. And then just looking at him on the DK side, getting up there in ownership, but like you said, I think he's the best option, probably by a pretty good margin at 6,100 for an SP2. So I think we can definitely justify that and probably justify getting over that mark.
Yeah, I'm all over Gausman. Just too cheap. I think he's actually good. You look at like his, the game log watchers, and they're a fun talking point. Last 2 starts, he hasn't been phenomenal, but they were at against the Dodgers. You went 4 2/3, got 6 strikeouts, only allowed 2 runs. And then in Coors against Colorado, he still went 5 strikeouts, 5 innings. Again, only a couple of runs. He can give up the homers.
We want.
As long as they're going to be solo shots. He's given up 8 homers in 7 starts. That's a little bit concerning. But pitching in this park and striking out as many guys as he is, I'm okay going up against Arizona for this price, even though they have a really low strikeout rate as a team. So I'm all over Gausman on DK and on FanDuel. I think he's my second highest owned pitcher over on FanDuel behind Lamet, but I've got both of those guys at over 30% of my lineups if the slate were to start right now. Yeah. Anything you want to mention on the hitting side here, or Gallen? Are you interested at all? 9,200 over on DK. On FanDuel, he's at 10.6, and then on Yahoo, Gallen is $47.
Yeah, so he's a pitcher I like. He's pitching very, very well. I think he's probably a better play today on DK at the 92. He's coming in. He's Alex's second-ranked starter as of right now, coming in slightly under his mark for being one of the top 2. So I definitely think we can justify that over there. It's a tricky price though, 92 when you've got Lamet at 88, you've got Ryu at 85, you got Plesac at 76. There's other pitchers we like. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that ownership over the day. If the ownership starts to drop, my interest in him goes up. It's definitely an interesting spot there. 10-6 on FanDuel, drawing less ownership over there. Definitely an interesting edge with what his probability of success is. But again, you're comparing him to Lamet at 9, Gaussman at 77, who we just talked about, Ryu's at 95. These guys are all cheaper than him. So it's going to be interesting, and it's a spot that I'll probably let the ownership dictate. And if he's going off at around 8, 10, something like that, I have no problem doubling that number up on him.
Yeah, on FanDuel, I'm right there with you. So I'm over the field on FanDuel on Gallen, even though he's not the greatest value over there. Just makes it a little bit tougher to fill out the rest of your lineup. He's not Scherzer necessarily, but he's striking out a ton of batters this season, and best park in the MLB to pitch in. And it's not like this is going to start as kind of a day game, I guess. What'll it be, 5 o'clock in San Francisco? So maybe not the perfect park for pitchers. But by the time you get to the 5th and 6th inning, it'll be dark. And anyways, it's just a great spot to pitch in. For Gallen, for Gaussman, both guys can strike out a lot of hitters here. So I'm really liking both guys on DraftKings specifically. And then I have interest on the other sites, just a little bit muted after that. Any hitters, or should we move it on to Houston and Oakland?
Yeah, not really for me. I think there's some savings in that Diamondbacks lineup, but it's not one I'm really looking to go to early on. They look a little bit overowned just based on the value on DK. One of the better value options on the board. I think it's actually the highest value score just based on their super cheap pricing. But I don't love the spot. I don't love the matchup. FanDuel, there's no real edge, and they're ranked down the board. So not really for me on the bats. And then San Fran, I think, is just priced way, way up on DraftKings and not worth the money for any of the quality. I think Mike Yastrzemski for 57. I've been laughing at that for the last 4 or 5 days. Everybody else in that lineup is just priced over their heads. A little bit more reasonable on FanDuel, but just not a spot I like.
Yeah, hard for me to get to the Giants bats. Even the secondary, like Longoria, righty for 4,600 in that park. I don't know. So maybe DK thinks they're in Coors or something like that. And they're checked out, and they're going to just focusing everything on NFL. So not sure what's going on with the Giants pricing. And then Arizona, I think they're going to be somewhat of an optimizer play. Just because you got Peralta 2,900 is getting a great out, is a good value. Calhoun, if he leads off, even guys like Rojas 2,700 dual position eligibility. So they're kind of easy to just throw in as one-offs or two-mans. So they're probably getting a little bit more ownership than what they actually should. So I'm going to try to avoid hitters as much as possible in this game for the reasons I listed. Let's talk about Houston and Oakland. Christian Javier going up against Frankie Montas. 4.2 implied total for the Astros, 4.9 for the A's. This is one where I'm not seeing a ton in my lineups right now outside of some I'm not seeing a ton of pitchers in my lineups from this game. I am seeing a bunch of the hitters, especially over on DraftKings. Do you like any of the pitchers? And then feel free to just talk about hitting take this game wherever you'd like.
Not wild really about either pitcher. I respect both offenses to a pretty good degree. Montas is a pitcher that I think has talent, and I like the price a lot on FanDuel at 6,300. That's kind of a broken price over there. But I'm much more interested in the bats in this game. I think we can get to both sides of this. I wrote up the A's last night, and they look like they're the top stack on the board right now, going up against Montas. A's are 11th in the league with a 180 ISO, 105 WRC plus against right-handed pitching this year. Strike out a little bit, 25.7% against righties. So it's 25th in baseball as of last night anyway. So maybe if you wanted to roll out like minimal shares of Christian Javier, he's expensive though, 8,200 on DraftKings, 77 on FanDuel. don't love the spot for him. I'd much rather be playing these Oakland Bats. Get some Matt Olson in your life, getting a very strong home run mark on him, the big lefty in that lineup. He's only around 10% ownership, decently high priced, as are the rest of those bats in the ace stack, but they're not going off crazy. The ownership is trending underneath their probability of being the top stack, and you're getting the top half of the lineup all around like that 10-12% mark. So I really like getting to them on DK. A little more heavily owned over on FanDuel because of the ridiculous pricing. Everybody is around 3,000 over there. So they're very, very easy to get to with some of the expensive pitching that we've talked about. So I think the A's are going to be very popular in a lot of my lineups today for sure. On the other side, I think we can get to some of the Houston Bats against Montas. You got a good mark on George Springer up top. We've got a couple of the big lefties, Michael Brantley, got Josh Reddick should be hitting near the top of the lineup. Sneaky MVP candidate this year in the AL, Kyle Tucker should be hitting right around the middle of the lineup. Really like what he's been doing. Still only 4,500 over on DK, 4,000 on FanDuel, not drawing a ton of ownership. So this stack is not very, very heavily owned. Springer's getting a decent amount and Brantley's getting a decent amount. And then everybody else is trending for not that much ownership. Tucker's at like 7. Everybody else is below that. So I think on DK, they make an interesting stack here.
Yeah, I really like both sides of this game for hitting. Probably looking at it right now, I don't have the exact numbers, but I'm seeing a bunch of these guys scattered throughout the top of my exposures on both sides. So you mentioned just a couple guys in Houston soaking up much of the ownership. I don't think they're going to be stacked very often. Either team, looking at the top stack tool. So I really like both sides of this game. I think two of the highest upside offenses in the MLB, especially Oakland. You look at their active roster, 109 WRC plus versus righties. Like you mentioned, they do strike out a little bit, but a bunch of power. Love Matt Olson today. I believe he's my highest exposed first baseman on DK. Chapman right now my highest exposed hitter on DK. So I'm all over Oakland, and then I definitely like Houston as one of my favorite stacks as well. Nothing against the pitchers. It's just an ownership compared to their chances of being the top stack thing, as well as I really love Lamet, Gaussman. I like Gallen as well. So that's how I'm going to end up starting a lot of my lineups, whereas I think it looks like the field is going to start with Scherzer and have a little bit less money to play with. It's a little bit tougher to get to Oakland, especially, but Houston as well over on DraftKings. So,
yeah, and I think that's going to be a big inflection point. What you just hit on is, all right, are we starting with our builds with an expensive stack, or are we starting our builds with Max Scherzer and some of the expensive pitching? So that's going to be a really big decision that people make early on, and it's going to dictate the direction of a lot of these lineups. And you're right, if everybody's ignoring this Oakland stack, I just definitely want to be on it. Just real quick down bottom, I just noticed the ownership on Sean Murphy, another catcher. I like to throw those guys in. 3,700 over on DK, only going around 3% owned. Hitting at the bottom of the lineup, so you're sacrificing a plate appearance like we always talk about. But he's going to have Ramon Laureano hitting in front of him probably, and also Grossman and Piscotty, the 2 spots ahead of that. So got guys that can get on base in front of him, and he's got a great swing. Really, really drives the ball when he makes contact. So I like him as a sneaky little catcher play on DK over there.
Love it. Love it. All over this game. I'm hoping this is the one that's 12-10. And just all my stacks are up at the top, and hopefully all of the viewers' stacks are up at the top as well. I think we're probably good on this game. We're going to move it to the last game, but just want to give another shout out to Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. They have CSV Edit, which is very important if you're looking to play some of these NFL contests over there. Yahoo's supporting us. They're doing a really nice job for us. So go support them. Get in the 500K baller, 100K to first. Not often you see that on a site not called FanDuel and DraftKings. So go support Yahoo. Last year there was big overlay in this, so it might even go off with no management fee. 12.3% is the absolute max, though. That's just 3/4 of what you're going to pay elsewhere before you even get to play the game. So 16% over on DraftKings and FanDuel. Yahoo running around 12% for most of their contests. They're doing some no management fee contests for NFL as well. They run those for MLB often, NHL, NBA, whatever sport, PGA. They've got a bunch of PGA contests over there as well. go support Yahoo, and shout out to them for sponsoring the show. We also have MLB ownership projections and NBA ownership projections for free today. So if you're looking to become a member, check out those ownership projections. Check out where Max Scherzer ends up if he's going to be in 80% of lineups tonight. Victor Robles, same thing for MLB. Those are a huge part of the process of everyone at the site. So give it away a lot. And then make sure you check out our NFL content starting up this week, because the first game is 3 days from now. It's really sneaking up on everyone, it seems like, but we're prepared. We're prepared. Last game, Colorado, San Diego. 3.6 implied total for the Rockies, 5 for the Padres. Freeland and Lamet on the mound. We've alluded to Lamet a couple times already. $8,800. He's striking out 33.3% of hitters on the season. Going to get a few righties in this Colorado lineup. I mean, is there any reason to avoid Lamet here?
Not that I can think of. He's a dynamite pitcher. He's a guy I like to get to all the time. His ownership's going up a little bit as the name recognition increases. 9,000 over on FanDuel. Great price on him. Great price tier. Strikes out righties like crazy. He's 34.5% strikeout rate against right-handed hitters. You mentioned some of the best bats in that Rockies lineup are right-handed hitters. Rockies strike out just 22.6% of the time against righties, which is the 11th best mark in the league. But their offense, they're at the 78 WRC plus versus righties, so 22% below average. That's 27th in baseball. 72 WRC plus overall on the road. So those two things combined together, Rockies on the road, we know, just not a good spot. Rockies on the road against a righty, definitely not good. So I think we can get to a lot of Lamet here, get a very nice projection on him. Just flipping over, he's Alex's top-ranked starter on both sites. Trending a little bit over-owned on FanDuel in terms of where his ownership mark is as compared to the top probability of success. But I think it's workable. I think it's one where we can kind of play within that and get to him as good chalk. On DK, trending right around his probability of being one of the top two, and I have no problem, honestly, going over that mark on DK. So I'm going to have a lot of Lamet in my life against this Rockies lineup tonight.
Yeah, my lineups are going to go as Lamet goes one way or the other. Got him in over half my DK lineups. Might even be more by the time he gets a lock. And then he's my highest owned pitcher on FanDuel as well. So just good prices all around. Then the best part of him being priced down a little bit is that he doesn't have to be perfect to pay off this salary. Like, he's not 11K. He doesn't need to go strike out 7 in 7 innings in order for it to be worth it. And then you got to find a cheap stack. Like, you could start your lineup with Lamet as an SP1. And that's an option that I'm going to be exercising quite a bit tonight. So not worried about the strikeout rate for Colorado here. Lamet, one of the better strikeout pitchers in all of the MLB this season. What about Padres bats? Because I am getting to a ton of them on FanDuel specifically. They're not crazy under-owned right now. They are a little bit undervalued on both sites. What are you seeing for the Padres here? A bunch of righties going up against Freeland, who has difficulty getting strikeouts.
Yeah, and that's the key with Freeland is there really aren't any strikeouts in that arm. He gives up more power to righty hitters. He's getting like 55% ground balls. He's a ground ball specialist. So that's the one thing that I would be concerned with, 21.4% soft contact. So he gets a lot of soft contact, keeps it on the ground. But I think these Padres are good enough to overcome that. I don't think his stuff is so good that he's really going to suppress this lineup by any means. They're 8th in baseball against lefties with a 206 ISO. Got a 117 WRC plus, 17% above average, which is 9th in baseball against lefties. 21.4% strikeout rate against left-handed pitchers, also 11th in the league. So just not a ton that I'm really concerned with. Haven't run any crunches, so I don't know how they're going to really fall in for me in crunches and how much I'm going to get to. But I would expect it to be a pretty healthy share as well. The pricing on FanDuel, nothing really tragic. DK, they're a little bit up there. You get 5,000 for Eric Hosmer, then your team is getting a little high priced. 4,800 for Austin Nola. up there a little bit, but I'm happy to pay the big tickets for Tatis and Machado, and then I can make the rest of it work. You've got like a Will Myers in there who's only 44, Jorge Mateo, a player I've mentioned a couple times, just immense amount of speed in that kid. So he's at 2,700. So depending on where he's hitting in the lineup, could be a good option to work into some lineups. Only 2,000 bare minimum over on FanDuel is an interesting play. Drawing 8.3% ownership over there, but the kid's got like 80 grade speed. So if he's on base, he's going. And if guys are hitting behind him, he could score from first on a single pretty easily. So he's an interesting play. Jurickson Profar, another interesting play along similar lines, not quite as much speed, more power. So I like Profar in that lineup. So a lot of different things you can do with that lineup.
Yeah, I love this Padres lineup. So I mentioned on FanDuel specifically, I play a spread out approach. So it's not often I get a bunch of hitters over 30%. I have 4 Padres right now over 30% exposure on FanDuel. Even for a 6-game slate, that is a lot for me. So they're showing up very favorably in projections and from an ownership standpoint. And I like them as a correlation play with Lamet. It's something I do in NHL DFS a lot, where you play the goalie with the stack. And it's something I like to do in MLB, but it doesn't work. Like, there's just not as much correlation to a starting pitcher as it is his hitters. I mean, the win probability goes up, but they don't pitch the whole game anyways, so doesn't matter as much. But I do like it when the prices are right, and I'll be doing some of that with Lamet here in Padres stacks and just going for the full onslaught against Freeland. He's not as bad as what he was last year, and he's not as good as what he was in 18. He's probably somewhere in the middle, but still going to be a bunch of balls in play, a lot of good hitters on this Padres team. So I'm all over that.
Yeah, anytime it's an offense this good with a contact pitcher on the mound, even a guy who does limit hard contact and everything, I think we can roll it out. And just looking at the ownership on FanDuel really quick, it's kind of interesting. It's really top heavy. It's all loaded into Tatis and Machado, and then you got like Hosmer and Nola, who are the projected 3rd and 4th hitters in this lineup, both below 1% ownership, which is really interesting. So it doesn't look like a ton of people are going full stack, at least with what we're projecting right now on FanDuel. So they could be sneaky over there in a weird way. So that's an interesting spot.
All right. So that is the main slate for you guys. Before we get out of here, just want to, I'm sure a bunch of you are enjoying your Labor Day. Maybe you got the day off and you want to play a little bit of early. One thing you could do if you want to get a full breakdown of the early slate is listen to the early bird. Terry, it was you and was it Jason Floyd last night, I want to say?
Yeah, me and Jason.
So Jason, Terry broke down the early slate. And so you can go listen to that again if you want a full breakdown, but just kind of want to get Terry's general thoughts, like kind of cliff notes on this early 3-gamer.
So in the early 3-gamer, let's see. I think pitching-wise, we've got Zach Wheeler, probably a top option against the Mets. Just clicking through the games, I think we could squeeze another good game out of Ian Anderson, the Braves rookie, going up against that weak Marlins lineup. I like him. Very, very expensive, though. 10-4 for Ian Anderson on FanDuel. He is more expensive than Zach Wheeler on FanDuel today. Wheeler's only 9,600 against the Mets, so he's 800 more expensive than Zach Wheeler, which is insanity. I think we can also roll out some Mikey Pineda against the Tigers. Tigers very weak lineup. Pineda only 8,200, so I like that spot. And then I like Pineda's offense, the Twins' offense going up against punching bag Michael Fulmer. Fulmer's really been struggling quite a bit since coming back from surgery. Not much in his arm right now, and we know about that Twins offense. 44 home runs versus right-handed pitching. 192 ISO is 9th best in MLB. Their WRC plus surprised me. It's only 2% above average against righty pitching, but this is a starter that has just got a big target on his back these days. So I think they can get to Fulmer no problem. Marlins on the other side of that game, I mentioned Anderson. Marlins are the 29th in baseball with a 124 ISO versus right-handed pitching. They've only hit 19 home runs against righty pitching this year. So I think Ian Anderson is definitely in play. That price tag is just a ton to swallow on FanDuel. But on DK, I definitely think you can get to some Anderson.
All right, there it is. I think I'm going to have to agree with you, especially on the Twins stack. And then I was liking Anderson. I know the projections like him as well. So if you're looking for again, more early slate stuff. Check out the early bird. We do that Sunday through Thursday night for the Monday through Friday slates for MLB. And I think that's pretty much about it. Real quick, want to mention the free premium content. Once again, MLB ownership projections, NBA ownership projections. Go play over on Yahoo. You're going to want to build your bankroll for when you are playing some NFL this season. They've got some really good contests, 500K baller. Check out our NFL content schedule. We've got a ton going on. This is going to be a really crazy week, so bear with us. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell, because there's going to be a ton of content coming your way. Thanks for Jordan for producing, as always. And we will see you guys back tomorrow on the MLB Strategy Show.